to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a book that I read, one that is a bit unusual, and I also did not like very much. This month, this is a book that I read for my book club, that I actually picked out instead of my friend Bevan picking out. We wanted to talk about indigenous groups for Native American Heritage Month, and we picked this one, and unfortunately I don't think this was a winner, and I'll explain a little bit about this later. It's a book that is about drugs and Indian tribe membership. I am referring to Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley, a book that was published this year. For those who don't know, and it's understandable because she is a fairly new author, Angeline Boulley is a member of the Ojibwe tribe, and she is from Sault Ste. Marie in the Michigan area. She's only published one book, this one, and to be honest, I hope she kind of keeps it at that, because she is not a very good writer. Not in terms of the prose part, that's fine, I'll talk about that later, but in terms of other stuff. She also has a history of working in the Office of Indian Education for the Department of Education. So she's a Fed, and it kind of shows with her writing. So that's pretty much all there is to say about Angeline Boulley, because she is a new author. So without further ado, let's talk about Firekeeper's Daughter. I will do a summary, and I will have to spoil it, even though it is a new book, because there are a bunch of pieces that, I have to spoil in order to really explain the story. And I'll do a little bit of an analysis, and we'll move on from there. So Firekeeper's Daughter focuses on Daunis Fontaine. She is a recent high school graduate who lives in Sault Ste. Marie near Sugar Island as part of an Ojibwe tribe. Her grandmother, Mary, recently died, and that's been affecting not only her, but her mother. And she was going to go to Ann Arbor for college. Go off the tribe and whatnot, but she's decided to stay behind and go to Lake Superior State College instead with her friend Lily, in order to be around her mother and help her cope with the impending loss of her grandmother Mary, who fell sick and is close to death. So that's about where we are with the story. The interesting thing about Daunis is that she is she's native. She's Ojibwe on her father's side, but she's Italian on her mother's side, and those sides have always been in conflict. And so Boulley kind of sets up this initial theme of being torn between two sides and not being accepted by really either. And you think that's where she's going to go, but she in fact does not go with that story. So Daunis ends up meeting a character named Jamie, who is training to be a part of her brother's hockey team, Levi, who is full Indian, or like he's Indian on both sides of his family. And so Jamie is mysterious. She doesn't know a lot about him, but she is beginning to fall for him as the story progresses. During one of the Ojibwe celebrations on the reservation, Lily's ex-boyfriend Travis shows up. At this point, he is addicted to meth, and he asks Lily to join him and renew their relationship. But Lily rejects that and says that Travis needs to get cleaned up. Travis then pulls out a gun and shoots Lily before shooting himself. And Daunis is a witness to all this. Jamie shows up before anyone else does and begins checking the vital signs. And it's very mysterious why he's doing all this. But Daunis quickly figures out that Jamie is a cop, and he urges Daunis to get away from this so that she's not part of this, and they go back to they go back to Jamie's house, where Jamie's Uncle Ron, or the man posing as his Uncle Ron, is actually an FBI agent along with Jamie. And from there, Daunis learns that Jamie and his Uncle Ron, are investigating a meth operation in the Sault Ste. Marie area, and Jamie and Ron believe someone who is a part of the reservation has been brewing up a sort of new mutant type of meth, which is more potent and kind of deadlier. And so at this point they ask Daunis to be an informant, which she decides no at first, because she doesn't agree with the FBI, and she also feels lied to by Jamie. But ultimately, after going through Lily's funeral, she decides something has to happen here. Someone, like, this is for Lily. They have to investigate and figure this out, so her death kind of isn't in vain. And so the sort of informant stuff goes on with the FBI performing one investigation and Daunis trying to perform another as a way of protecting the culture that she's around. And at the same time, Jamie and Daunis get pretty close, although she is hesitant to fully engage in this relationship because Jamie isn't who he says he is, and Daunis is unsure if he'll actually be there tomorrow. If they manage to solve this, like, is Jamie still going to be there, or is he going to move on to the next investigation? And Ron is even actively discouraging this relationship from even forming. A number of Daunis's other friends die, and there's some evidence that they are associated with the meth operation, not distributing it, but taking it in some form or way. So like her friend Heather and a couple other people end up dead as a result. Around this time, Daunis finds her Uncle David's notebook. Uncle David used to be the informant, but he showed up dead during the course of the investigation, which Daunis and her family did not know about. But Uncle David was investigating the crime through the FBI, working with them, and discovering that their lead, that there was some sort of hallucinogenic in the meth, wasn't actually true. And Daunis even actively hides this because they were using some tribal medicines in the meth in a spinoff of it, and Daunis doesn't want the FBI to know this because that would interfere with the tribal's practices, which is one interesting element of this story. Daunis then goes to a party with Jamie later, another tribal celebration. One of the creepy characters of the story, Grant Edwards, actually rapes Daunis, which she only followed him into his hotel room because she kind of believed that he was associated with the meth operation. And after this happens, Jamie and Daunis break up, both their real relationship and their fake relationship, as Daunis believes all of this is Jamie's fault, and there's kind of no way to know if he's real or if he's just faking everything that's going on. And after this happens, we learn that Daunis's half-brother, Levi, has actually been the one leading or dealing drugs and doing this entire meth operation with Grant's son Mike and a number of Levi's hockey friends. And at this point, they kidnap both Jamie and Daunis, and they say that Daunis, because she is great at science and whatnot, she has to be in charge, or not be in charge, but make all the meth. Otherwise, they're going to kill Jamie. They're essentially holding him. And they also say they might kill her mother if she doesn't take part in this investigation. And in the process of trying to get her to the meth lab, Daunis manages to smart her way out of things, and after a particularly scary car crash, the police arrest everyone, and they manage to save Jamie in the process. And at the end of the story, it really seems like there's going to be charges for Levi and one of his friends, but not for Mike Edwards, who I don't think is native. And I think what Boulley's trying to get at is the fact that often indigenous groups take the fall even when white individuals are to blame. And at the end of the story, Daunis decides that she is going to a university in Hawaii to study more about plant science before she eventually comes back to the tribe and participates as a healer. So it seems like it ends on a positive, if but sad note. In terms of analysis, there is a little bit to talk about with this story. One element of the story is that of the Fontaine side versus the Firekeeper side. It really seems that Daunis is torn between her backgrounds, torn between being a Firekeeper and being a Fontaine. And really you see that at the beginning of the story from her birth, because her Fontaine side took her away after an accident in which her mother and her father were arguing while her mother was pregnant. And as a result, the Fontaines and the Firekeepers have always been separate, because once her mother came back, Daunis found out that her father was in a relationship with another person, which produced her half-brother Levi, who she loves, but there's always been that sort of separation, where her like there's been it's been difficult for her to be seen as Indian, because she's been hanging out with her mother for so long, and to some degree it's even been said that the Fontaine side did not approve of a savage. Of a savage being, associated with the Fontaines. So they didn't approve of that relationship. Allow me to read you a quote from this. "I'm not enrolled. My dad's not listed on my birth certificate. One of my many decisions that my Fontaine grandparents made because my mom was only 16 when she had me." Jamie must have heard the shift in my tone, because he pauses and asks, "Are you okay talking about this, Daunis?" "Yes," I say, realizing my ease at sharing about myself. "Maybe not everything, though. I'm not ready to admit how angry I feel over their decision that affected my tribal enrollment." And right there you see the split, where the Fontaines decided that they would take care of Daunis, and as a result, she didn't really have that much of a relationship with her father. She did, but eventually he died, and so she wasn't able to develop a strong relationship with her. But that also affected how she would be, viewed within the tribe, where their father's side actually loves her, but a lot of the tribal leaders have decided that she's not eligible to receive tribal benefits, therefore not an actual member of this tribe. And it really seems that Boulley is setting this up to be the central struggle of the whole story. And I feel like that could have been a great story to tell. Unfortunately, Boulley resolves this all too quickly. At a midpoint through the story, Daunis's aunt, or one of her family members, manages to find a picture that proves that her father viewed her as her daughter. And there's also a sort of emergency form to fill out that proves blood ties. Like it's a blood test, which her aunt is going to do because she is related to the father side of things. And a whole bunch of elders sign up to basically sign affidavits affirming her tribal membership. And at that point, the tribe votes, and it passes by one vote, essentially. And therefore, Daunis is a member of the tribe and can receive all the benefits. So it seems like Boulley resolves this all too quickly. There's no struggle on Daunis's part to be seen as a member of the tribe. In fact, I feel like all the time that Boulley could have spent to focus on that struggle is spent on this weird FBI investigation that I feel is that kind of... It kind of seems like Boulley wanted to tell two different stories here, and I'll talk about that later. But this struggle for Daunis is resolved too quickly. Like, yeah, sure, there's one, like her tribal membership thing only passed, according to the tribal council, by one vote. And so maybe Boulley is trying to say about how like the people making the decisions are determining who gets seen as native and who doesn't. But I think I'm kind of like reaching there as to what Boulley was trying to say, and that problem does exist, but Boulley's not doing a good job in talking about it. Like if she wanted to say something about that, she could have focused more on that issue, but she did not, and I feel like that definitely hurts the story here. Another theme about this story is that of pain, and specifically how Daunis manages all of the pain. Like, she absorbs all of this pain in this story as a means of protecting her mother as well as some loved ones, and making sure that others don't feel pain. And so in doing so, Daunis acts as a goon, a metaphorical goon or a figurative goon, whereas a goon in hockey is the person who roughs up other players in order to protect team members on their side. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with hockey fights and how the goon often starts fights in order to portray a certain role as the tough guy on the team. So everyone comes to the goon now instead of the other people. Anyways, Daunis is playing that role in life where she's managing the pain and standing in for others so that they don't have to get hurt or take any brunt of it. She especially does this for her mother. And I feel like Boulley's done a really good job here of illustrating that how she's trying to absorb the pain for her mother, often by keeping secrets. And she says so later in the novel, like she doesn't want her mom to know what's going on because that would just add to her additional pain of losing her mother, Mary in this case. And also she still hasn't gotten over the pain that's been there for losing her husband, both in a car crash, but also losing her husband to another woman. So a lot of pain. And so Daunis doesn't want to add to that. There's also that of the Firekeeper myth that Boulley talks about in this story, which Daunis is part of the Firekeeper line. So the Firekeeper myth is that some girl, like she was related to like First Man or something. Like her responsibility was to handle the sun, and this was her job every single day, which was a lot of responsibility and whatnot. But it as Daunis sees it, it's also a burden, one that she does not want to have for herself. So allow me to read you another quote from this. "My brother calls me that sometimes, our dad's last name and all. He thinks it's ironic because I'm a really bad singer. I roll my eyes and continue stretching as the sky lightens. I don't like her story because she doesn't even get her own name in it. Her identity is in relation to her dad, Firekeeper, and then her husband, First Man, called Anishinaabe, and then her sons named after each of the 4 directions. She gets stuck with the responsibility of lifting the sun every morning. I do a few jumping jacks. What if she was tired and one day and said, 'Screw it, I'm going back to sleep'?" And that's the struggle. It really sounds like Daunis is aware of this struggle for Firekeeper, but to some extent, like if she's aware that the Firekeeper doesn't want to deal with this burden anymore, or even this pain of being the Firekeeper, of doing it day after day after day, like it seems like she should also be aware of it for herself, that she's putting on all of this pain and being a figurative Firekeeper by basically blocking out the pain for others. Surely this is going to have a lot of mental effects for Daunis, as you can see through the story. A lot of self-doubt, a lot of lack in self-confidence, and a lot of depression, which I think Daunis feels, especially after her friend Lily dies. And it seems like, becoming aware of this, there should be some sort of resolution where Daunis decides that she doesn't want to be the figurative Firekeeper anymore. But it doesn't seem like Boulley offers any resolution to that. Like she does reveal a bunch of secrets to her mother, especially about the FBI investigation at the end of the story. But it doesn't seem like there's any resolution to her realizing that she's taking on the burden of all this pain so that no one else has to. At the end of the story, she just decides to go to Hawaii for college. And it really seems like she's doing this because she's running away from the pain. Like she hasn't fully confronted this pain, and instead of confronting it, she's just going to Hawaii, which might produce additional pain once she becomes distanced from her tribe. So I don't know if that was Boulley's point, that sometimes we run away from our pain. It doesn't seem like it. Seems like she muddled the message somewhere, and there isn't an effective resolution. And again, there doesn't need to be a resolution to this. There just needs to be an acknowledgement, at least on Daunis's end, that the pain is there. And I don't think it's ever fully acknowledged by her. So again, another issue with the story where like Boulley is setting up something really great, but fails to act on it. And so ultimately, all of this is leading me to my final point here, which is this book is a mega disaster. I feel like there is a lot of good to it, and especially in the first 100 pages. Boulley does a great job of setting this story up. And in those first 100 pages, I was like, wow, this story, it has potential to be one of the best of the year. Like I as I was reading, I was like, wow, if this continues, like I'm gonna name it, end of the year list for sure. But I feel like one of the big issues is the death of Lily, which like it feels kind of out of left field in a way, and not at all what Boulley was initially trying to talk about at the beginning of the story. Again, how the story just separates into two different stories that are trying to be told, and I feel like a lot of that is because there are too many surprise twists in the story. Lily's death, Jamie being revealed as a confidential FBI informant, which could happen by itself. Like Lily doesn't need to die for that to happen. And with that, it just there's so many like, oh, I didn't see that coming. That was a weird choice on Boulley's part, and the story kind of falls apart with that FBI presence because it splits it into two, and because it doesn't feel realistic anymore, because there could be like a meth presence on this tribe, and Daunis's response could be to investigate it on her own, because as she says multiple times through the story, like the FBI isn't helpful, like they make things worse, so why work with them at all? She could have done this on her own, and I feel like that would have made the story a little bit better. Another issue is the fact that Levi is the bad guy in this scenario, which I feel Boulley does very little of setting up, and it's just sort of like surprise rather than something that is earned in her story. Like she does point out that Levi has a lot of money at some point, which the story goes through great efforts to point out, oh, that's because it's part of the tribe and the shared money that he gets from the casino. But it seems like Boulley goes through efforts to like say, oh, Levi isn't the bad guy here. But then later in the story, she's like, oh no, it turns out that he actually is the bad guy along with his friends. And I don't get why that is. I don't understand why the big twist has to be that Levi is the bad guy. It doesn't really make sense because Boulley does nothing to set up that it is him and actively goes out of her way to make it seem like it isn't him. So it just seems like she's lying to the readers there. Another issue is Daunis's rape that happens in this story. I feel like that didn't need to happen, especially because you could have painted Grant Edwards as a creepy guy, which Boulley was already doing, but it was revealed that Grant was in a relationship with one of Daunis's friends, who was later murdered, and you could have argued that that was the creepy thing, that was the unsettling thing that needed to happen. The rape is totally unnecessary and just seems to be added for shock value and as a way to wedge something between Jamie and Daunis. And I feel like it's bad, it's not very good writing, and ultimately it adds nothing to the story, and I think Boulley could have done a lot better here. Now, it is the case that indigenous women are raped a lot. A lot of sexual violence is done towards indigenous women, but I don't think Boulley was trying to illustrate that. She does say at the end of the story that she was, but I feel I didn't get that vibe throughout the story because this is the only way in which violence is done against a indigenous woman throughout the story. And it doesn't need to be rape that you're illustrating here. Sure, a lot of indigenous women show up dead in this story, but that could be how you illustrate that. You don't need to show it through the rape of Daunis, which just feels traumatic in this case. And the biggest problem with the story is that no problem is actually solved at the end of the story. At one point, I think it's Jamie who says that an investigation led by the FBI could solve the meth problem on this reservation, which at multiple points, I think Boulley actually smartly discounts that statement by saying that the FBI doesn't actually help problems. They actually actively, create more, whether intentionally or not, because, sometimes the FBI will cause problems in order to solve them down the road in order to justify their own existence. And a lot of the times, crime on reservations is ignored by the federal government, especially crime done towards women. For the FBI to say, oh, that this problem will be solved, it feels kind of dumb. And I feel like that point is never truly like argued against, especially at the end of the story, where, yeah, like Mike Edwards ends up getting away and might continue his meth operation in the future, whereas Levi and his friend Stormy might actually, be held accountable more so. And Daunis just ends up leaving. And the problem with that is that it doesn't feel like anything's actually solved, because the FBI stepped in, but the systemic problems that existed on the reservation that allowed for meth to flourish in the first place are still there. Like, there's still financial issues, there are still social issues, there's still a great number of problems that exist on this reservation. And I feel like Boulley never acknowledges that throughout the story. Like, she doesn't point it out in any sort of way. Like, she talks about it, but she never drags it to the end, where she should, in order to highlight how the FBI investigation did nothing. And it's often the case that these investigations, led by the federal government, don't benefit reservations because they don't address the underlying issues that allow that meth to flourish in the first place, as I've just been saying. And I feel like Boulley should know that, being part of a reservation, being indigenous herself, and working for the government. But I think this might be an instance of propaganda, because I think working for the government, she's come to think, oh, the government is actually good and benefits reservations. I can't, that seems harsh on me, but and I don't want to tell Boulley how to be indigenous and tell her that she's writing her story wrong, but she's kind of writing her story wrong. And it's very frustrating, because as I was reading this, I wanted to put the book down, because I was like, this does not seem realistic or right or even knowledgeable about the history of reservations in America. And so ultimately, I feel like this entire story is it has a lot of potential. It's fantastic ideas, a lot of stuff worth talking about. But with the FBI investigation and the melodrama of the Jamie and Daunis relationship, overly dramatic at times, it fails. Like, the story falls flat on its face. And it might be one of the worst books of 2021, just because there was so much potential. But Boulley seems to go out of her way to make all the wrong choices within this story. And I know that's pretty harsh to say, but someone's got to say it. And I feel like a lot of people are going to say, oh, she talks about all these issues, like this is a good book, as I've seen a number of reviews actually do, but it's all superficial. Like, she talks about it on the surface, doesn't actually go deep enough, and ultimately doesn't address the real problems that persist that allow any of this to actually happen. So it's fine on the surface. It's good that she's like directing herself toward these ideas, and maybe in future books she can perfect the message that she's trying to say. But here it comes off as awful. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. A interesting book that fails to really reach the levels that it possibly can. Perhaps I'm reviewing this based on the book that I think it can be, rather than the book that it actually is. But if I talk about the book that it actually is, I get a little infuriated, because it's a mess, and it's terrible, and it just has a number of structural issues that cause it to fall apart. And if I'm talking about the book that it could be, that's not what it is. So we can't really focus on that side of things. If you read this book before and you want to comment on something I said here in this very long video, do so below. I would love to hear from you. Let's have a discussion about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this book and why they probably shouldn't read it. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and informant travels. Farewell.